This is the place to find yourself.
Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and then there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain thousands of years of memories and also a thread of the modern future.
I like to use every minute and just get out and hop on the ferry and just go from the Asian side to the European side and just enjoy the wonderful weather with the wonderful Bosphorus behind me and just enjoying the moment of Istanbul.
Istanbul is very beautiful with great culture.
This city is the symbol of diversity. Come and study at Maltepe University.
Come here and feel like you're home.
Dear participants, welcome to the Maltepe University International Students Congress on Humanities and Social Sciences. I am Damla Yılmaz, and I am honored to be the president of HUMSOS in this year. Since 2013, MUISC has hosted students from all around the world, giving them the opportunity to express and exchange research interests and ideas on a variety of important issues in their respective fields of study. MUISC is a great occasion for all of our guests from different kinds of cultural backgrounds to share their knowledge. Our Congress had to be conducted on a digital platform due to pandemic in this year. And there isn't doubt that it has affected our lives. Hence this year, main topic is adaptation to pandemic and the new future. I would like to thank everyone for your interest and participation to MUISC. All of your studies have been evaluated and elected by our committee. I would also like to thank you for the HUMSOS committee for their great efforts. We all have worked so hard for everyone to have a decent experience in the Congress. I wish you all a good time in our Congress. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name is Özge, and I will be the moderator of today's two sessions of the Congress. Before starting the presentations, I would like to state it will be a question and answer part of the end of each sessions. If there are questions you want to ask to the presenters about their presentations, you can write on the comment section and I can direct them to the presenter at the end of this session. Now, we are starting the first session with Katuna Terminitsa to give her presentation about consumer behavior and its change during the COVID-19.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Hasina Turmanidze. I'm from Georgia, from Batumi Shotor State University. And today's my presentation is consumer behavior and its change during the COVID-19. So before we start, I want to keep our attention in my presentation plan, and we are going to talk about consumer behavior, macro and micro level reasons, and consumer habits, analysis, surveys, conclusion, and of course, references. So my first question is, what is consumer and what is consumer behavior and who is the consumer? Consumer, as we know, is a person who identifies his needs and makes a purchase and dispose of the product in consumption process. Of course, we know that everyone is different from each other, and this individuality also affects on their habit, especially in the consumer behavior, and also this latter is reflected by many factors. So in our case, the main factor is COVID-19. As we have already seen, the COVID-19 changed users' behavior. So what is the consumer behavior? In accordance with Michael Solomon, we can identify it as a decision-making process or physical activity, which includes acquiring, evaluating, using, and disposing of goods and services to satisfy our needs and wants. Also, we know that market working system, which includes buyers and users, but still it's driven by buyers, so which creates their demand and also leads to its delivery. And on the other hand, this is the basics for market quantity, magnification, and economic inclusion. But also we have macro and micro level reasons. And for macro level reason, we can say that this is the social sphere in the area. And for micro level reason, for user behavior, it's like personal, individual characteristics and etc. Also, we all know that every market has its time and location, and it's not shaped out in one day. It's like shaping all the time. So we know what to buy, when to buy, and where to buy. But still, at one point, it's like habitual. But on the other hand, this is like habitual, and on the other hand, the matter also has its meaning, and we have four main contexts. So first of all, this is the social sphere, second technology, third is rules and regulation, the consumption, and the fourth is natural disasters and also the global pandemics. So social sphere is like when the person moves from one place to another, from one city to another city, also marriage, having children, and workplace, friends, co-workers, all these are belong to the social area. So second one is the technology, and technological progress also affects on consumer habits and behavior. And the current situation is good example of this, because we are using online education, online services, online platforms, and etc. And in recent years, the prime example of this are smartphones, internet, and e-commerce. Rules and regulation are third main context, and which are related to the public and commercial sphere, and also the consumption, which means avoidance of the harmful food, for example, cigarettes, alcohol, and etc. And the last one are natural disasters and global pandemics, and our COVID-19 is in the first context, and this is I can say, one of the most important and less predictable. So in order to get to know more information about consumer behavior and its change during the COVID-19, I conducted a study to get to know more information of my respondents' view on this issue. And in our case, one of the most relevant methods was chosen, and this is the questionnaire. About the structure of the questionnaire, we can say that it was completed online due to the pandemic situation. The target group was people working in multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary fields. And we had also age limits, so young, middle age, and retired respondents, and namely between 17 and 64 years old. And it consisted of open and closed question, in total 13 questions. You can see now the diagram, and from this you can see that we have 106 views, and I got the answers from 51, and from conversation rate it's like 40%. We can say that it's quite okay, and the average time it's like 6 minutes and 54 seconds, and we can say that it's quite clear. This questionnaire was quite clear, understandable, and easy one. And countries of the respondent, the majority respondents were from Georgia and from Poland, Albania, and Lithuania. And there was the first question: what is the consumer behavior? And here we can see that this is like there is a definition of the consumer behavior. And right side we can see here one of the respondents answer, for example, consumer decision making in a given situation, taking into account external environmental factors, and etc. And we can say that they gave me they gave me on this question the similar answer to the consumer behavior definition. And we can say that they know, majority of the respondents, they know what is consumer behavior. Also, we have the product motives, and they agree with this definition. Product motives may be defined as those impulses, desires, and consideration which make the buyer purchase a product. So from the diagram, we can see that 92% of the respondents, they agree. And also we can say that they know what is product motives. And with these two types of motives, rational and emotional, they choose rational one. with the 76%. But however, when they were asked the factors that influence the consumer behavior, they, on the first place, they answered the personal with the 29%, then social, then psychological, and then cultural. Also, we in decision-making process, we have 5 different steps. First of all, this is need of recognition, information search, evolution of the alternatives, purchase decision, and the purchase behavior. And we can say that 98% of the answers were correct. And after this, we can say that respondents are well acquainted with the decision-making stage. So after this, it should be noted that one of the main questions was where they buy food before the pandemic and after pandemic. And from this diagram, we can see that mostly majority of the respondents, with 86%, before the pandemic, they buy food locally, so offline. But after pandemic, also the majority, they thought that they think that they prefer to buy offline. But we can see also the this part, online shopping, which is also doubled from 12%. We can see that now it's like 31%. Also, one of the most important questions was about food, about medicine, and the clothes. We can see that after pandemic, they changed their consumer behavior, and mostly they said that it's like a slightly modified and a little bit changed, or nothing has changed in direction of food. In direction of medicaments, medicine, we can say that 48% they answered that mostly they answered that nothing has changed, because we can say the medicine is something that is like first aid at the end. Even in this critical situation, you can change your behavior in this direction. And the food, we can say that also nothing has changed, or I have reduced my consumption of all sorts of foods. So one of the positive aspect, let's say positive aspect of this COVID situation was the skills that you have found during the lockdowns and during all these isolations. And my respondent, they answered that 22% online education and better use of online platforms. Also 20% more spent with more time with their family, and also experience with the recipes and etc. So also we can say that from the answer, we see that the majority of respondents, they believe that pandemic and its accompanying process have had the most negative effect on tourism industry, in particular restaurant and hotel business, education, and healthcare. And we have 5 key trends. So first of all, this is increased digital adaptation. So this means that we are using these online platforms and online education and etc. Change in mobility patterns, that means that we are not mostly we are using not face-to-face communication, but like this again, the online communication. Change in purchasing behavior, increasing awareness of health, changing in interpersonal behavior, and etc. And the plus and the positive aspect, let's say, it was like new ways to play music, share learning, shop online, and also any other things which I said previous. And in conclusion, I can say that this pandemic has changed human existence, but it's necessary to adapt to the new environment and to live, coexist in harmony. And of course, in critical situation, people's and the consumers' behavior are changing, but we need to adapt with this new situation. And for the companies, from the answer, we can say that we need to create, of course, small and big businesses, they need to create an elastic digital workplace task force, also rethink about the communication with the customers, rethink about the products, rethink about the service portfolio, and the change data-driven operator model, and also scan market from MA opportunities and others. So this is the references I choose from English and from Georgian resources, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to state that unfortunately the keynote speaker of the Congress, Professor Bill Williamson, could not attend due to the technical problems. And now I'm inviting to Elif Çakar to give her presentation about positive and negative physiopsychological consequences of working remotely in the pandemic.
This is the place to find yourself.
Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and then there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain thousands of years of memories and also a thread of the modern future.
I like to use every minute and just get out and hop on the ferry and just go from the Asian side to the European side and just enjoy the wonderful weather with the wonderful Bosphorus behind me and just enjoying the moment of Istanbul.
Istanbul is very beautiful with great culture.
This city is the symbol of diversity. Come and study at Maltepe University.
Come here and feel like you're home.
This is the place to find yourself.
Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and then there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain
We can't hear you, Elif. We can't still hear you, Elif. You should be open your microphone.
Oh, sorry. Hello everyone, I am Elif. I'm studying philosophy and psychology at Maltepe University. Today, I would like to talk to you about the positive and negative psychosocial consequences of remote working in the pandemic. First, I want to talk a little bit about remote work. Remote work can also be defined as working from home, work from home, mobile work, bir saniye. 1 minute. Remote work can also be defined as working from home. Work from home, remote work, and a flexible workplace are all forms of employment. Employees do not commute to a central workplace such as an office, warehouse, or store. Working hours are free. It first appeared in 1970. Wait.
This is the place to find yourself.
Istanbul offers great universities and the lifestyle is really amazing here.
So I live at the dorms at Maltepe University and I'm really happy with it. There's a cleaning service every few days and there's the library nearby which is open 24/7.
My first impression when I came was like, it's huge. You have everything in one place.
When you first come to Maltepe University, you don't know where what is and you're like, oh my God, I need help. Guess what? You're not alone. There is the international office people over there. They're like family. They're very helpful and they're always there for you.
Istanbul is the perfect mixture between ancient and modern. Coming into this city helps me discover myself, learn about so many different cultures, learning about the world, which will help me in writing future books.
At Maltepe University, we have a lot of research centers. Because of that, we have the ability to participate in a lot of international projects.
Here at Maltepe University, the education consists of both practical and theoretical. We get the opportunity to practice everything we learn in class in real life. So after we graduate, we have a degree and we can work all over the world.
People come to Istanbul all the time, but what they really miss when they visit are the antique shops, which contain thousands of years of memories and also a thread of the modern future.
I like to use every minute and just get out and hop on the ferry and just go from the Asian side to the European side and just enjoy the wonderful weather with the wonderful Bosphorus behind me and just enjoying the moment of Istanbul.
Istanbul is very beautiful with great culture.
This city is the symbol of diversity. Come and study at Maltepe University.
Come here and feel like you're home.
Hello everyone, again. I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Bill Williamson, to his speech.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Professor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I think I'm online talking to Özge.
Yeah.
So what happens now? Shall I give a talk or? So I can start my keynote speech now. Okay. Right. Thank you. We'll speak later. Bye. Right. So I will begin. Well, hello everybody. I'm sorry there has been some complication with my connection to Istanbul, but here we are at last. As you know, my name is Bill Williamson. I'm from Durham University, retired, and have been invited to speak to your conference today. So, günaydın and happiness, hoş geldiniz. Unfortunately, I don't speak Turkish, but I'm glad to be here and I hope you can hear me. It's a privilege to speak to the Maltepe Conference, particularly because the audience of people I'll be speaking to are not only in Istanbul, a beautiful city, but they're all over the world. There are people signed up for this conference who are from Europe, from Central Asia, East Asia, Latin America, and it's astonishing that this is possible. And one of the things that makes it possible, of course, is the internet and COVID. COVID has made it necessary to have conferences like this, but it has also made it possible for us to talk together across boundaries. So there is a global interest in the topic that we're discussing today, which is the topic of pandemics. And I'm very pleased to be able to begin this conference because I believe in the importance of the social sciences and the humanities to help us understand change in the world. And I'm sure you agree with me, that the social sciences and the humanities have something to say about this phenomenon that we are dealing with today, namely pandemics. It's not something that I'm an expert in, but then not many people are. What I am sure about is that the people who are attending this conference each have relevant expertise to help us all understand pandemics. You come to the topic of pandemic from many different angles. There are some papers at this conference which will deal with the biology and the epidemiology of pandemics. There are other papers that will deal with the social changes brought about by COVID-19. There are others that will deal with ethical questions about how we should live with COVID-19 and how we should relate to other people. There are historians who will make comparisons between today and the past, because human beings have lived with pandemics as long as there have been human beings. So there are people at this conference from many different academic backgrounds who will throw new light on this rather complex issue of pandemics. I hope to indicate that these multiple perspectives will not only help us understand pandemics, but will help us find a way out of it, because we have a global problem. We need global solutions, and that's a theme that will be a major part of what I want to try and say in this presentation. My background is in social science and education, which gives you a clue that I'll be talking about probably two things. One is the social structure of our societies and the way in which social structures have been influenced by the pandemic. The other, education, is about learning. And an important theme for me, both in my academic work and in my life as a citizen, is the theme of learning and how we can learn new ways to solve old problems. And the two themes are connected. We live in societies, we are part of a social structure. It happens to be a global social structure. And we have to make sense of it. We have to learn how our societies work and how they're changing. And in this particular context, we have to learn how we can best deal with this common problem of a disease, a virus, a pandemic, which is changing everything about our world. Let's hope this conference will help us find some positive ideas. Let us hope, therefore, that this knowledge is what I call knowledge productive, that we will meet, we will talk, we will share ideas, and out of that process, new ideas will emerge. We need to learn our way out of the problems caused by this pandemic. I've given the title of my talk, Dark Times and Better Prospects. Two ideas that we do live in what I've called dark times, but at the same time, we have opportunities now to make such changes that human beings have never been able to imagine in the past. We have the means to solve many problems that were once unable to be solved. But on the theme of dark times, I just want to remind you that over this past 18 months, we have all lived with a pandemic. People from different parts of the world who are here today, from South Africa and Latin America, from Europe, Northern Europe, Southern Europe, each have experiences of the pandemic. I remember my experience at the very beginning of March in 2020 here in Durham, where we live, and there was simply a state of shock. People felt that they couldn't go out. They were very worried about who they would meet. The streets were silent. People were very depressed and gloomy. There were a few who didn't care, and we became very angry with those. We stopped shaking hands. We didn't go to the shops. We ordered things online. A very strong memory for me was that when we went to a shop to try and buy some hand sanitizer to stop the infection from collecting on surfaces that we might touch, we couldn't buy hand sanitizer. And lots of people bought ordinary goods like toilet paper so that no one else could. People began to hoard things that they believed they would run out of. Now, I have those memories, you have those memories. Sadly, probably we all have memories of people we knew who died from this. And in some countries, Britain being one of them, the death rate has been very, very high, and everyone has been touched by it. One day, we shall collect the stories of people about their experience of COVID-19, and we will build up a picture of how this virus affected societies across the world. So comparative research will be very important in understanding the epidemiology of this disease and also of the best ways in which to solve it. This disease has arrived at a time which I am characterizing as a dark time. It's a time when most of the Western world has experienced terrible austerity, cutbacks in government expenditure. It's a time when many countries in the world have produced very strong authoritarian populist leaders, some of whom have denied the reality of COVID. It's a time of great social and economic inequalities. It's a time of migration. It's a time of war. the Middle East in particular is in a very dangerous situation. Syria is in a complete state of being wrecked. And the political problems of the region are likely to break out into very serious global problems. So it's easy to believe that we live in very dark times, and there are elements of that period which are very worrying. Some commentators, political scientists, talk about the world of post-truth politics. Post-truth politics, meaning that political life is not run according to the rules of democracy or rational dialogue, but according to the rules of propaganda and simply lying. That we cannot know what to believe anymore because we can't trust politicians to speak the truth. On top of these political and cultural problems, we have the pandemic. It's a pandemic, a global pandemic that has killed literally millions of people and could yet carry on to kill millions more. And it's a pandemic that has exposed all of the weaknesses of our global order, of an international system that is very fragile. We know, for example, that the rich people of the world are less likely to be affected by the pandemic than the poor. That's a theme I shall come back to. But we know also that although we live in a global order, and some people praise that and think it's very important for our economic welfare and well-being, they believe in free trade, they believe in collaboration across borders. Although the global system is meant to bring many benefits, it is also very weak, and the capacity of governments, or the willingness of governments, to collaborate across international boundaries in the context of this pandemic has been shown to be not very good. Rich countries have been unwilling to share vaccines with poor ones. Countries have been unable to collaborate sensibly on the control of borders. The disease has found those weaknesses a very useful opportunity to spread very rapidly. And the disease, as we know, is mutating. So our defenses against it have to be upgraded all of the time. So what do we have to do? Well, we have to stop and we have to think about what's possible. We have to think about what we know and what we need to know. In one of my favorite novels, a novel about the Spanish Civil War, the French writer André Malraux talks about a group of airmen fighting fascism on the Republican side, and they've been in a battle and they've lost the battle, they've lost some planes, they've lost some friends, they're exhausted. And at the end of this particular mission, one of the pilots says to the captain, who was actually the French writer André Malraux, he says, "Tell me, Captain, how should a man live his life?" And if you think about it, that's probably the most important question any of us could ask. How should we live our lives? It's very important in the context of a global pandemic. How should we live our lives? After a short pause, the captain says, "By turning every experience into conscious thought, my friend. By turning every experience into conscious thought." He doesn't say by trying to be happy or by trying to be good. How should a man live his life? By turning experience into conscious thought. And I think that's what your conference is all about. Each of you has experience which you're strengthening with research, you're writing, you're thinking, and you're turning that experience into conscious thought that you need and want to share with others. And out of that process of sharing will come new knowledge and understanding. That's my thesis that I hope to encourage you to accept. Changing the angle from which we approach this, I often find it helpful to look at our period in history, our period now, and the events that we're living through from the point of view of the future. In the future, what will the historians of our times say about our response to this pandemic? They'll meet, and they'll meet for a long time into the future. Think about it. We're still doing research on the plagues and pandemics of the past. There is still a lot of active research going on into the 14th century Black Death plague that killed more than 50% of the population of Europe. So the historians of the future are going to be busy looking at our response to this disease. And I wonder what they will note. I think, firstly, they will note that it was astonishing that, given our understanding of science and our capacity to communicate, there were many serious political leaders who denied the existence of the pandemic, or who said that it wasn't something we should worry about. I'm thinking here particularly of ex-President Trump, but also of President Bolsonaro of Brazil, but also of the current British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. At first, they treated the pandemic as if it was just a kind of flu, a kind of winter cold, nothing to worry about. It could be easily treated. Of course, that particular position they had to move from very quickly, because as infections increased and as hospital admissions increased and as the hospitals became overwhelmed by dead bodies, and the political crisis around it, then the politicians had to act. But they found that they didn't have the right equipment. They did not have the protective equipment for medical staff. They didn't have masks. They didn't have ventilators. There was an obscene scramble across the world to find these things. They hadn't been prepared, simply. In Britain, to give a local example, in 2016, there was a government simulation of a pandemic when they tested the idea of the pandemic and how British institutions would respond. That report wasn't published until earlier this year, but what it showed, that is 4 years ago, Britain was unprepared. We didn't have the equipment, we didn't have the staff, we didn't have the medicines, we didn't have the coordination. But the government ignored it. Now, I know that's a unique British problem. The government in Britain ignored it because they were preoccupied with something else, the ideological task of removing Britain from the European Union, so-called Brexit. Their main preoccupation was this ideological one of coming out of the European Union. And that blinded them to all sorts of things. But it meant that they initially denied the reality of the pandemic. The historians of the future will also look back at the way in which some politicians dismissed the expertise of scientists. I suppose the craziest example of that was President Trump at his press conference suggesting to one of his chief medical officers that it might be possible for people to inject disinfectant into their bodies to deal with the virus, and that would solve the problem quickly. This was scientific ignorance of a very high order. And the British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, dismissed the claims that he needed to be very careful about, for instance, shaking hands with other people, by saying that he shakes hands with everyone. He's a very friendly man and likes to be thought of as a friendly man. The result for him was that he nearly died in hospital with COVID a little footnote to the history of this country. But some of those politicians dismissed the importance of science. On the other hand, science was brilliant in its response to the COVID. The scientists have developed vaccines, they have developed treatments. The epidemiologists have used complex, sophisticated mathematical models to predict the course of the disease, and they have been absolutely vital in developing global responses towards it. But lots of people didn't trust the science. The future historians will note our unpreparedness, our disbelief, really, that these things can happen to us. People, particularly in the developed Western world, have been very complacent about the threats that they face. Another theme the historians of the future may note is that despite our science, we are environmental vandals. As human beings, we are destroying the natural environment. Climate change is taking place very quickly. The area of land that we occupy is increasing. The area of land occupied by wildlife is decreasing. But the connections between the two, the connections between human societies and nature is breaking down. And this opens up possibilities for zoonotic illnesses, of viruses passing from the animal world to the human world. Now, that's not just a public health matter. That is a matter of how human societies are organized. It's about values and how we disrespect nature, how we exploit nature rather than live with it in a productive symbiosis. So the historians of the future will realize that in the dark times in which we are now living, we have not understood enough about our impact on the environment and how that impact feeds back to us in terms of our health and our security. But they will also note that the distribution of illness and death from this pandemic follows not just national boundaries, but it follows the boundaries of social inequality and health inequality across human societies. It's interesting that the highest rates of illness and death are in those countries with the poorest systems of healthcare. And that is not a natural problem. That is a problem of how we have decided as human beings to organize our healthcare systems. In the West, unfortunately, but it's not just in the West, this is true of India as well, we have allowed health to become a marketplace where health and illness are opportunities for profit making, for hospitals, doctors, but particularly for the medical industrial complex and the pharmaceutical industry that makes fortunes from human health and ill health and disease. It makes fortunes from problems that could be overcome with rational policies of health. So I think the historians of the future will note that we didn't deal with the pandemic very well, despite our wealth, despite our science, despite our communicative capacity to share ideas and to solve problems. Some societies did deal with the pandemic more or less satisfactorily. Taiwan did, New Zealand did, South Korea did. They did it by closing borders, by testing and tracing, by developing a culture in which people looked after themselves with masks, social distancing, hand sanitizing, and so on. Those cultures have done quite well. They closed borders. They took the view that this virus had to be suppressed. Others thought that this virus can be managed. America thought it could be managed. Brazil thought it could be managed. India thought it could be managed. Britain thought it could be managed. but their management skills were not up to the task. So the historians of the future will ask important questions about why it is that there was so much variation in the response to the pandemic across the world. And I'm sure some of them will come to the view that it was because of politics and because of a commitment or lack of it to help other people, to share, to be proactive. Well, who knows what the historians will in the future say, but some of them, I'm sure, will make some comparisons with previous pandemics, with, for instance, Black Death of the 14th century. And what would they see when they compare how we have dealt with pandemic and how people in medieval Europe or elsewhere in the world dealt with pandemics? Well, in the medieval world, I learned from the historians, they knew that the disease traveled across national boundaries. The Black Death traveled right across Asia, through Europe. They know that, well, the historians know that in the medieval period, no one really knew what caused it. They were ignorant of what caused it. They believed that it somehow came from contact with people, but they didn't know in what way whatsoever. They believed it was caused by foul air, by bad air, by something they called the miasma. But they had no theory of infectious diseases, no understanding of microbiology. And what we know about human beings, not just in the medieval period, but even today, in the absence of information, in the absence of scientific understanding, people invent all sorts of ideas to explain what's happening to them. Not only do they invent ideas, but they also blame people. They have to blame something for their disease, for their tragic experiences. Medieval priests thought that the pandemic, the Black Death, was caused by sin, and that the only solution to it was to pray to God. Others thought that the stars were at fault. They looked at the heavens and they saw alignments of the stars and the planets and thought that unfavorable movements in the stars were the cause of problems on Earth. So prayers, astrology, they didn't help matters, but I suppose people believed in them. They had no remedies, none whatsoever, no pharmaceuticals, except one remedy which they did understand, but unfortunately, again, it was a remedy that only people who had the means to do so could use, and that was to use the expression, flee the plague, run away from the plague, leave the towns, go to the country, go to homes away from the city centres. Well, the rich could do that, but the poor couldn't. But they did flee the cities, they did go into quarantine, and that was the most important response to the pandemic, the most successful one. But in that midst, they also blamed people. I mean, it's one of the footnotes to the long, horrible history of anti-Semitism that in Europe, and particularly in Germany of all places, Jews were believed to be the source of the pandemic, that the Jews tried to poison wells, poison the water in wells. And there were pogroms, there were murders of Jewish communities in Germany in the 14th century, believing that they were the cause of the disease. And it's very interesting, this link between Jews and disease is one that resurfaced again in the 20th century in the propaganda of Adolf Hitler, who often referred to the Jews as tuberculosis carriers. So blaming people is a common response. But we do that here. Donald Trump made a great play in his speeches during the pandemic in America of blaming it on the Chinese. He constantly referred to the virus as the Chinese virus. And of course, this played well to his populist base, who felt that they had an answer to the question, why are we suffering in this way? Ah, it's the Chinese, they're to blame. Nothing to do with us, nothing to do with our healthcare system, nothing to do with our unpreparedness, nothing to do with our inability to use science properly. So we live in dark times. We can make comparisons with the past. The historians of the future will not look upon our response to this virus and believe that we did well. They will expose all sorts of errors and mistakes. But there is a big but here. We have learned quite a lot from it. We live in dark times, but there are better prospects. But if we think about what we now know that we didn't know, we know about the science of this particular virus. We don't know yet its particular cause. Did it come from animals to humans in China and then spread? Is it a zoonotic virus, or was it an experimental virus made in a human laboratory, perhaps in China, which escaped to cause the damage it has? We don't know the answer to that yet, and the World Health Organization is trying to find it out. But we do know how it works, and we do know a lot about virology. And it's interesting that, and I hope that our Turkish audience will enjoy this one, that although our British government prides itself with having done well in the development of the vaccine, particularly AstraZeneca vaccine, and claim that it's a great British achievement to have carried out such an important and successful, let's admit it, successful vaccine program in this country. But the people who, and they say it is a British achievement, but the scientists who developed the Pfizer vaccine were Turkish, working in Germany. Interesting that, the German-Turkish link, the international link in science, but some populist politicians here don't want to acknowledge the fact. But science has responded to the crisis. We know how the virus works. We know about proteins. We know about enzymes. We know about the manufacture of vaccines. And we've improved our treatments. Even in the course of several months, medical scientists have discovered ways to help people who have COVID to get better more quickly. We know also, because there has been research into this, not just by epidemiologists, but by social scientists, that countries with authoritarian leaders and populist politics and greater levels of social inequality, Brazil, America, the United Kingdom, Italy, do badly in respect of managing the pandemic, do badly in respect of healthcare and death rates, so that we have discovered that there is a very clear political dimension to this pandemic. We know that populism, the idea that somehow government is for the people, is really quite dangerous, because the politicians who thrive on the basis of pleasing the people often encourage people to behave in ways that are dangerous. In India, which paradoxically is the world's leading manufacturer of vaccines, there is a populist government under President Modi, a Hindu government, which continued during the early phases of the pandemic to hold massive political rallies and important religious festivals. These events created super spreader events, which gave the virus a wonderful opportunity to expand at a very rapid rate. Similarly, in America, Mr. Trump's political rallies in the run-up to the 2020 presidential election catalyzed, fueled super spreading events, which created a massive problem in American society. The richest society in the world has one of the highest death rates from COVID. If that is not an indictment of the kind of society America has become, then I don't know what is. But it's not just an American problem. I'm speaking to you from Britain, where Britain is among the top 5 countries in the world with the highest death rates per 100,000 of the population. And the problems are comparable to those of America. You know, denial, populism, health services that have been under attack and are run down, rising inequalities, and blaming the victims. Because there's a strain in British politics in which some politicians put the problem back to the people. You know, we're not keeping socially distant well enough. We're not washing our hands often enough. We're not using masks as we should. It's as if somehow we've caused the problem ourselves, when actually the problem is a structural one, and indeed it's a global one. So what can we do? How can we bring realism back into politics? How can we realize the better prospects that are available to us in these dark times? Well, I can see on my screen, I hope it's there on yours, a little diagram 1. And I use this as a way of thinking through my view of the pandemic. It's a diagram which echoes the great aims of that wonderful period in European history of the 18th century, the Enlightenment, when new ideas emerged, among them social science, of course, but new ideas emerged to change it, to somehow bring about a better society. And these were expressed in the revolutionary ideals of France in 1789. And the words are still written on civic buildings across France: liberty, equality, and fraternity, a term we now must translate as solidarity. Liberty, equality, solidarity. And I look at that diagram and think about those words, each of them, and realize, and have realized for a long time, something I quite profoundly believe in, that we can't have any one of these things, like liberty, for example, without having the other two. To be free, we need equality. To be free, we need to respect other people and to value other people. We need solidarity. And what we've learned from certainly the history of the 20th century is that if a country places more importance on liberty than on anything else, as for example in the United States, then such countries become unequal. If a country places too much emphasis on equality, then like Soviet Russia or perhaps modern China, or China 30, 40 years ago, then what suffers is liberty. You can't impose equality. Where it's happened, it always results in concentration camps. Countries which have privileged solidarity invariably destroy liberty. That seems paradoxical at first, but when you think about it, the totalitarianism of the 20th century, Soviet totalitarianism, Chinese totalitarianism, but particularly German totalitarianism, made its appeal to the people. In Germany, it was Das Volk that Hitler appealed to. And when you do that, then you invariably exclude other people. In Hitler's people, there should not be any Jews. In Mr. Modi's people in India, there should not be any Muslims. And so it goes on. Solidarity can become toxic. You can't have solidarity without justice and liberty. So you can see the argument. From any one of these positions, you need the other two. Now, think of the link between fairness and solidarity. You can't have solidarity without fairness. But think of the problems we have in becoming more concerned with other people, in treating other people as of equal value to us, as having rights like ours. There's something standing in the way of viewing the other as being on the same ground as us, as belonging to the same kind of society as we do. The other can be someone from a different ethnic group, someone with a different sexual orientation, someone with a different religion. The other in India is the Muslim. The other in Nazi Germany was the Jew. The other for many Americans is the homosexual. And so it goes on. We find ways of demonizing others in ways that ensure that we will not treat them with justice, with fairness, and with respect. In a paper that I've circulated for the conference, I hope you get it, I make a reference to mutant strains of inhumanity, because I think of racism, of xenophobia, homophobia, as strains of inhumanity. They're like viruses. They infect relationships. They destroy our sense of the other. And when we allow people to die in the way that we have during the pandemic, we've let the older population die. We've let people who are poor die. We've left people in developing countries to die because we've been unwilling to share our vaccines with them. I mean, the problems of the pandemic in the future are going to be much worse, probably, in the third world, or what we used to call the third world, than they are in the present world. And we will pay a heavy price, all of us, because we haven't shown enough solidarity. So the general conclusion is our failure to deal with COVID is a consequence of a failure of values, a failure of politics, a failure of our limited mutant sense of solidarity. And we have to overcome that. And the people who will help us overcome that are people like many of those attending this conference, who are interested in the humanities, in the social sciences, and they're interested in these subjects because somehow they know and sense that human beings have to find better ways of living together on this planet. So what do we do? What can we do? How can we turn our dark times into better prospects? How can we, to use a phrase I like, how can we learn our way out from the present problems? Well, the first thing we do is to say no to despair. It's very easy to look at the future and think dystopian thoughts, not utopian thoughts, but the opposite, dystopian thoughts, that things are just going to get worse, that the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the ones who will come at the end of the world, war, famine, disease, death, they're too close to us. The apocalypse seems just too close. But we say no to despair. We're going to look at our better nature. We're going to look on the brighter side of things. I put in as a footnote to all of that, God is no solution. President Trump claimed to be a Christian. Mr. Modi in India claims to be a good Muslim. I don't know what Bolsonaro in Brazil thinks, but God is no solution. What most of the major world religions or their followers seem to forget is that their God gave them all free will and told them to exercise it and to obey the rules that he laid down. And insofar as we didn't, then we suffered the penalties. So we can't really blame God either. But God is no solution because he gave us the free will to solve our problems on our own. But we've probably chosen not to. So what can we do? Well, what we have to do is reimagine politics. And for this, I draw upon the work of a writer, a German writer, a German political theorist from the 20th century, a woman called Hannah Arendt. Arendt was very important for her political work on totalitarianism and for her ideas about the nature of politics. And the essence of it, in her case, was that politics was about dialogue. Politics was about conversations. Politics was about people solving their problems through discussion and through democracy, for democratic practice. But at the core of it was thought. Hannah Arendt thought that all problems would be solved by discussion and dialogue, by what she called thinking through. And I think we have to think through, and we can do it. And you'll see another diagram, I hope, a kind of diamond on its side. And each of the points of that diamond, I think, are issues that we need to consider. We've got knowledge. Thinking through will mean developing new knowledge. Clearly, that has happened during the pandemic, and it will have to happen again. This pandemic has not ended. It will not end. We will need new knowledge. We've got criticality. Criticality is the idea that we have this capacity to think, to question, to doubt. It's a human capacity essential to our capacity to innovate and to come up with new ideas. We have the word possibility. Possibility is about the human imagination. We can think that the world can be different. The people in medieval Europe, faced with the Black Death, did not imagine that it was possible to be without such illnesses, that they were part of the order of things. We know that we can be without them. We can think differently. We can imagine a better world, and many people do all the time. We need a sense of possibility. It need not be like this. Healthcare systems need not be as poor as they often are. And then we have interdependence. What the pandemic has taught us, well, we knew it, but it has sharpened our understanding of it, is that we live in a global society now. We need new terms to describe that global society. The social scientists are trying to discover them. But at the core of it is interdependence. Something happens in a lab or a market in China, and people die in Toronto or Detroit or Rio de Janeiro. That is interdependence. So we need to understand that interdependence. And each of these things touch upon our capacity to be creative, to think our way to a better future. And I think what we've learned from the last 200 years of both politics and social science is that we're not in the grip of fate. We're not in the grip of iron laws of history. What Karl Popper, the philosopher, called historicism, the belief that we are on certain tram lines leading in a particular direction, is a false view of history. We can change. We do change, and we have to change, because our ideas help us change the world. Ideas are, to use a social science term, reflexive. They not only reflect reality, they help us to create it. So finally, I'll try and draw these thoughts to a conclusion. How will the future historians think about us? Well, they will realize that in the course of the pandemic, we learned a lot. We learned about lockdown. We learned about the importance of the policy strategy of suppressing the virus, where it was very successful in Taiwan, South Korea, New Zealand. They suppressed it. Countries which merely tried to manage it didn't do so well. We've learned a lot about how to change behavior. We've learned a lot that people are quite crazy. They're crazy about the effects of vaccination. There has been vaccination resistance, fears that it's part of some conspiracy on the part of the state to track us down, or it's something that will cause women to become infertile, or that God prohibits it. There are lots of conspiracy theories about vaccination. We haven't quite learned how to deal with that. But we've also learned that the pandemic has changed a lot. It's affected our societies in ways that will take our sociologists years to describe. A small footnote, for example, we learned yesterday in Britain from a piece of research by the Institute of Science and Economic Research at Exeter University that the mental health of women looking after children in Britain has deteriorated significantly during the lockdowns of this pandemic. Living alone, isolated with children, has been very seriously damaging to the mental health of women. I've read elsewhere that domestic violence rates against women have increased. They're big problems, but small footnotes. On the other hand, we've got fantastic examples of new kinds of collaboration. As in your countries, in this country, most university teaching for the past few months has been online, and they've discovered successful new ways of doing it. And this conference itself is an example of a global conference made possible by our innovations in technology and our ability to use it. And I'm sorry, mine this morning wasn't that good, but thanks to your conference organizers, I'm here. But in principle, this technology is fantastic and will open up an entirely new future for university and school education and international collaboration. We have to continue to play to the better sides of our natures, that we have the means to do so. We can move from dark times to better prospects. We can make the right kinds of choices because the choices are ours. It will require collaboration, work across boundaries, detailed research. It will require us to be knowledge productive, to share ideas. As the great American philosopher John Schotter once said, in all good conversations, something new happens. And it was Hannah Arendt's great belief that the birth of every new child is all of the evidence that we need, that the future is open. No child comes into the world knowing that it's going to live a life as its grandparents had lived. Everyone comes into the world knowing that we're going to build a new life fit for our needs and interests and for the new circumstances we face. So there are better times ahead if we choose to seize them. And I hope that I've given you encouragement and support. The conference papers that you will hear here today and tomorrow are wonderful. They're multidisciplinary. They come at the problem from the perspective of many different countries. And these are just the ideal conditions for developing new ways of thinking about the world and this pandemic. I hope you find the way forward to share your ideas, to capture them, to consolidate them, to build on them, and to keep in contact. That's the kind of world we need to live in. Thank you very much, and sorry for the technical delay at the beginning. Thank you.
I would like to thank Professor Bill Williamson for giving us his time and his valuable presentation. We are glad to see you today in our Congress, Professor. Thank you again.
Thank you. If there are any questions, I'm happy to try and answer them.
I'm looking for the comment section, but I can't see any questions, I think. So it is finishing now. Thank you again.
Well, I'm sorry, I have to go. I can't stay for the rest of the conference. It's a COVID problem. We haven't seen our grandchildren for nearly a year properly, and a small window of opportunity has opened up for us to travel to a different part of the country where they live, and that's what we have to do. We have to seize the opportunity. But I hope that was useful, and best of luck with your conference. It's been very well organized, and I think it will be a very important conference. So my congratulations. Very innovative. It's just what we need.
Thank you, Professor.
Bye.
Bye. And now I'm inviting to Emrullah Ecer to give his presentation about attachment styles and marital status are predictors of Perma mental well-being.
Hello, I am Emrullah Ecer. I will present today the Perma mental well-being and attachment style and how it affected our daily life. So I think you can see the presentation, and I want to explain my best career. And I studied in Poland in psychology. I graduated last year, and now I study in cognitive neuroscience master program at URFU in Yekaterinburg in Russia. So our subject is that attachment style and marital status are predictors of Perma mental well-being. If you don't have any background in psychology, I will explain in depth how attachment style and marital status affect our mental well-being of Perma. If you don't know Perma, I will explain after short a while. So what I will explain today, I have contents which includes introduction. I will explain what is attachment style, how we classify it, and I will explain Perma mental well-being. Actually, shortly, I can explain now. P is positive emotion, A is engagement, R is relationship, M is meaning, A is accomplishment. So I have also theoretical background, which describe my theoretical background with my theory. And I have participants and design, result, and conclusions. So introduction. If you don't know attachment theory can be interested in by a lot of people, because we are human, we need to interact with other people, we communicate with other people, we need social skills, we need empathic skills, we need everything related to humanity. So attachment theory refers that interaction between children and parents. Actually, it is the founder of the attachment style is Main Ainsworth. If you don't know him, he created an attachment style classification, and he described that affection bond between mother and child affect children mental well-being, brain development, and cognitive skills. And in adulthood, we also have an attachment classification. How we can describe it? We can describe it an affectionate bond develops into individuals in adulthood. For example, if you have a person who feel close to him or her, and you described himself in an empathic skills, in social skills, you feel very good. You feel that you can understand him, her, and this connection between two individuals referred to attachment theory. And it is our main question: how attachment theory affects our mental well-being. So attachment theory is classified into groups. We have secure attachment, we have insecure attachment style. But insecure attachment style also divided into two groups. For example, we have insecure attachment fearful, we have insecure attachment preoccupied style, we have insecure attachment dismissing style. So insecure attachment fearful, how does people feel? For example, if you have a person that you know, he or she is afraid of intimacy, rejection, have a problems in emotion regulation, and coping strategies. What does it mean, coping strategies? For example, if you're under stress, you cannot control your stress and you cannot go to home-based state. What is home-based state? Home-based state means that, for example, you have a balance baseline state. If you are happy, you have a balance happy level. So, but you are getting very joyful. So you have to turn back this happy balance state. But if you are also, you have a normal anxiety, stressful state. So it is your home state that refers to emotion regulation state. And if you cannot coping with the strategies, it means that you may have a fearful attachment style. So people with fearful attachment style have high avoidance and dependence were observed. So in the second level, we have preoccupied style. How we can describe these people? These people have high emotional reaction. For example, they are getting so sad, so anxious, they cannot control these emotions, and they are demanding, they need too much things from you, they want you to be close to with them, and they are involved in close relationship. The problem is here that they don't know how to communicate with people in a good way. For example, they want too much. Even you don't want to them to be close so much, they want more. Or sometimes they are so anxious and you cannot control this person and you cannot control yourself as well. So in dismissing attachment style, we have also distant relationships, highly rely on himself or herself. So how we can differentiate dismissing and preoccupied style? Because preoccupied style need people and dismissing people don't need people. They need distant relationship. So this is the slightly difference between this secure attachment style. So if you want to engage in more attachment style theory, I recommend Shaver and Picolin's book called Adult Attachment Style. It is really good. And Perma mental well-being. Actually, Perma mental well-being, there are a lot of mental well-being theories, but I like so much this theory because this theory explains also mindfulness, also abnormal psychology. For example, if you have a depression, anxiety, and you have a Perma mental well-being treatment method, so you will have a nice and coping strategies in anxiety and depression. So what does it mean, positive emotions? To what extent people can cope with stress and maintenance of feeling hope? So we want people have to cope with this unwanted emotions. They need to be hopeful, and it contains statements relevant to positive emotions, enjoyment, pleasure, and satisfaction. So how people enjoy in this life, how people are satisfied in this life. So this is referred to positive emotions. And engagement. In the second stage, we have engagement, and engagement refers to how well a person is engaged in any activity or work. It can be any activity related to work, related to your academic career. It means that how you engage, how you prefer to do this work, and how you are motivated. So we have three-level relationships, measure social skills in a person, such as social connections, intimacy, emotional and physical connections are considered as positive relationship. So we want people to be to have positive relationships rather than preoccupied, fearful, or dismissing relationship. So in this case, I think attachment and Perma is really connected, and they have a very similar bond and communication. Meaning, we have meaning, and meaning means that how well people dedicate themselves for a goal. For example, goal motivation therapy. If you want to be motivated, you have to have a goal. You have to have a meaning of your life. It is close to humanistic and positive psychology. It can be connected to social institutions or religion, politics, community groups, and organization. No matter what you have meaning in this life, it is important how you dedicate yourself to this meaning. Accomplishment. How well a person is organized to a setting goal, having responsibility for achievement, and pursue targets. Why I like Perma mental well-being so much? Because they are really interrelated to each other. But there is also another dimension that I want to mention. If you put here negative emotions, you will underscore this score. So these levels. For example, if you have negative emotions, your positive emotions will decrease, engagement decrease, relationship levels will decrease, meaning of life will decrease, and you will feel not accomplished and not successful. So you will have a failure in your life if you have so much negative emotions. So theoretical background. Perma is negatively related to depression, anxiety, stress, and psychological effect of COVID-19. So, for example, if you have a low level of Perma, which is referred to positive emotions, engagement, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment, you will have a tendency in depression, anxiety, stress. So how it is important to decrease depression, anxiety, stress, and COVID-19 fear. So we have to increase Perma level. So I also conduct a study in Russia at Ural Federal University, and I saw that in Russia there is a slight difference in attachment style, and their attachment style is changed during pandemic. So there is a sign here, how attachment style and why it is changed. For example, I noted that preoccupied attachment style in Russia, 80%, fearful attachment style, 6% increase approximately, and dismissing attachment style, 5%, and secure attachment style, 8% decreased. So what we know here now, during pandemic, fearful attachment style and preoccupied attachment style increased. So we have now a technique at cognitive coping strategies. We have to increase Perma level to decrease preoccupied and fearful attachment style. The research conducted in the United States also demonstrated that 53% of adults had mental health problems during pandemic. People performed high worries and stress. So my theory is that if we want to change level of Perma, and if we increase it, we can change the adverse effect of the pandemic. So here, the research aim was investigating the relationship between Perma mental well-being and attachment style, how they are related to each other, positive or negative. So the second aim, exploring how marital status and attachment style are together predictors of mental well-being. Why marital status are important here? Because research also showed that if you are married and if you have a close friend or close relationship with other people, it can be coping strategy for you. So I want to explore how they are related to and affected each other. And how was the participant and design? Study conducted in Turkey with 66 participants. Majority of participants were females, and mean age was 33, range from 18 to 60. Majority of participants were single, and participants fulfilled Perma profiler scale along with health, loneliness, and negative emotion scales. So we have also alongside with Perma, we have health, loneliness, and negative emotion scales. So we will describe and understand how these scales are related to each other, and during pandemic how it changed. In order to classify attachment styles, participants completed relationship scale inventory, which contains 17 statements. And I did also statistical data, Pearson correlation test, t-test, multiple regression analysis were implemented by me. So results, how we can describe and compare in Turkey how Perma levels changed. In Turkey, positive emotions in my study show that we have 7, mean of 7. So before in 2017, it was 8. So 1 point decreased. Engagement, this is a really impressive result because engagement during pandemic increased. Why? Maybe people have too much spare time. They have to engage in their life goal setting and their life, and it can be a reason why engagement level was higher than before. So we have social relationships, positive relationships level. As we see, it is dramatically decreased, and we can say that in Turkey, relationship during pandemic changed and decreased. Why it is important? Because relationship changed our depression level, emotion regulation, cognitive strategies. So it was important to underline how relationship level dramatically changed. And the meaning of life. Also, there was no actually significant difference meaning of life, because I think during pandemic, maybe people thought that they have to dedicate themselves to a goal, a motivation, an institute maybe they have much more goals because they have too much time to think about. accomplishment level, also it is decreased, but people, they think they can have a goal, but they also have a perception they cannot succeed. So there is a problem here as well. We will see in the future how it is affected. Health, 6.67. Here, approximately the same. There is no significant difference. And negative emotions, as we see, there is a significant difference in negative emotions because it was 3, now it is about 5. So loneliness, people also felt lonely during pandemic, and it explained how relationship level changed and decreased. And we have second outcomes, attachment styles and during pandemic and in 2016. So as we see in Turkey, secure attachment in my study, it was 18%, but before in 2016, it was 34, approximately 2-fold decreased. Fearful attachment style, approximately same, but increased 1%. Dismissing attachment style is dramatically changed. We have 49% dismissing attachment style. Before, previously, it was 32. And preoccupied attachment style, approximately the same, but decreased too. I think preoccupied attachment style transferred to dismissing attachment style. So what can we say here? How we can interpret? We can say that secure attachment style, people decreased and people felt lonely. People cannot feel secure during pandemic, and they felt fearful, they felt dismissing, they had problem preoccupied social skills. So what about in Russia? How can we compare Russia and Turkey? And how cross-cultural relationship and context affect this attachment style? In Russia, in my study, secure attachment was 20%, approximately same, but 2% in Russia was higher. Fearful attachment style in Russia was too high than Turkey. And dismissing attachment style, as we see that in Russia, it was lower than Turkey. So Turkish people felt more fearful, but Russian people felt more preoccupied because the level of preoccupied attachment style was about 31%. So cross-cultural effects also change our attachment style, our social skills, our emotion regulation skills, our PERMA levels. So we have to consider it as well. And relationship between attachment style and PERMA. As we see that secure attachment style was positively correlated to PERMA, positive in emotions, engagement, relationship, meaning, and accomplishment, and negatively related to loneliness. For example, if you are secure, you are less lonely, you feel less lonely. And if you have fearful attachment style, you have low level of PERMA. So in Turkey, as we see that fearful attachment style increase, so Turkish people have much more lower level of PERMA. So preoccupied attachment style was positively correlated to negative emotions. So Russian people, we can say that interpret, had much more negative emotions, and they felt also lonely more than Turkish people. And loneliness, PERMA affected marital status. So how we can interpret the situation also? Participants who were married had a higher mean of PERMA and than single people. There was a significant difference between groups. So people who were married and who had communication, close communication, had less adverse effect of pandemic. So multiple regression analysis suggests that relationship status and attachment style together were significant predictors of permanental well-being. So we have to consider that marital status and attachment style should be together considered to understand permanental well-being. So if you understand attachment style, you will understand how our mental well-being changed, increased or decreased. Conclusions. Importance of secure attachment should be considered after and during pandemic. For example, governments can have strategies to increase attachment style. secure attachment style, and mental well-being. During and after pandemic, social communication skills are important because as we see that mental well-being also related to social communication skills, empathic skills, role-playing games are important in academic setting if you want to increase importance of secure attachment and permanent well-being. So future studies should go on investigating attachment styles after pandemic with other dimensions. What does it mean, other dimensions? Other dimensions means that, for example, academic success, how attachment style affected academic start during pandemic. And because it is important to change our the children life and the adulthood life in university, in academic setting, everywhere, it is important. In the academic setting, the skills should be improved by teachers. How it can be? There are role-playing games, there are empathic skills games that helps people, students, teachers create a social communication skills. And PERMA model of therapy should be considered. What does it mean, PERMA model? For example, Martin Seligman in 2011 showed that when people write 3 positive things in their diary, their level of depression decreased. So during pandemic, maybe people can read how they felt positively during this day, but it can be very tiny things as well. For example, if you feed a cat, also it can be positive. So it doesn't mean that you have to consider very big, huge success or happiness. Just small, tiny happiness also can be crucial to improve permanent well-being and decrease depression, anxiety, stress disorder. Thank you for your attention. And if you want to contact, my mail is here, and this is my references.
Thank you for the presentation, Emre Hajar.
Thank you.
Now we'll continue with Yuan Koroma with his presentation about control societies and biopolitics throughout pandemic times, a study on Deleuze and Agamben.
Good afternoon to everyone, and I would want to thank you, Maltepe University, for opportunity offered to me for presenting my research. I will share the screen. I hope my presentation is available to everyone. My short presentation of my research is named Control Societies and Biopolitics Through Pandemic Times, a study on Deleuze and Agamben. I am an undergraduate student at the Faculty of Philosophy and Social Political Science at Alexandrian Cluj University from Iași, Romania. The aim of this study is to point how the concept of control can be used as a theoretical tool for describing the new socio-political and philosophical perspectives that emerged within the occurrence of COVID-19 pandemic. My methodological approach consists in a comparative analysis between 2 major concepts and field of research which provide relevant insights for understanding the pandemic context. The first concept is named control societies, a visionary term coined by French thinker Gilles Deleuze in 1990, designed to describe the future stages of late capitalism and inherently its historical, political, and ethical implications. And the second concept is named biopolitics, a term coined by Michel Foucault, aimed to describe the new state tendencies by the end of 18th century to politicize the biological and also to understand the biological as a mass concept through the idea of population. Foucauldian legacy on this topic is continued nowadays by the researchers of Italian philosophers Roberto Esposito and Giorgio Agamben. The thoughts of the later on COVID-19 pandemic constituting the other framework which we'll utilize for our comparative purpose. Michel Foucault is renowned for his interest in shaping the power relation existing within a society, using the genealogy as a historical tool for describing the development of societies perceived through the lenses of power relations and technologies of domination. Therefore, Foucault speaks in his works about 2 major types of societies: societies of sovereignty, where the ruler is seen as a divine representative on earth, being capable of regulating the man's right to live or die, and disciplinary societies where the functions of power are decentralized and the accent is put on the norms that discipline human body. Deleuze, continuing this line of thought, is coming in 1990 with a new concept of society where invisible and permanent control, digitalization, mass modulation, and the accelerated evolution of capitalism are understood as key terms for the newly emerged paradigm of existence. The sine qua non condition for the birth of control societies consists in the latest developments of the capitalist economy, where the ethical paradigm of corporation is replacing the industrial factory paradigm from disciplinary societies, resulting in new ways of performing control inside the communities. The display of control in this third type of society is decentralized, lacking in transparency, and also has the capacity of colonizing the private space of a person in the name of the capital. And this type of control is named corporate control. Control societies and COVID-19 pandemic. The fact that control societies are economic framed type of societies can lead to the assumption that COVID-19 pandemic is not just a biological or a political crisis, but also an economical one. This crisis is not primarily a crisis of political governance, but a crisis of capitalism, a crisis of an economic system which shaped and influenced culture and politics entire centuries, arrives now in a moment where a biological agent stopped its permanent evolution. And now we will use the Deleuzean concept of territory and its applicability for describing how the lower classes in economic hierarchy, who are also the most exploited classes in capitalism, are the most disenfranchised. These classes suffer a process of deterritorialization without reterritorializations in the cases of workers stuck in foreign countries after losing their jobs. We also need to compare the internal borders with external borders and how the absence of an economic context for working extends the social gaps and inequalities maintained by capitalism. This crisis is understood as a post-political one, where the economical factor dictates the shape of political actions and norms. The next perspective is on biopolitics and COVID-19 pandemic. And through the lenses of Giorgio Agamben, this crisis is not seen as a biological one, neither as an economic one, but mostly as a political crisis. The virus is portrayed by Agamben just as an internal factor of states' political interest to normalize the control on human life and to deprive humans of their rights. A right to live in the scenarios of selection between hospitalization of the youth and hospitalization of the elders, right to work in the cases of economic sector shut down by the spread of COVID-19, and right to free movement between the states or right to education. Therefore, COVID-19 pandemic is reduced to a simple pretext for governing forces to justify their abuse of power by normalizing a state of exception. The virus is seen by Agamben not as dangerous as the new political narratives on medicine that it can create. The major problem of Agambenian perspective is its reductionism. It reduced the understanding of the crisis of COVID-19 pandemic to just one of its areas, namely the political one. If we would accept this perspective, we would be forced to accept that this crisis doesn't possess in itself any kind of autonomy. In my opinion, this is not the context where the biological is colonized, influenced, and subordinated to the political, such as Agamben wants to show us, but is a context which can be understood in two possible ways. A, either as a force appeared from outside the political sphere, but with the capability of conditioning political and economic actions, and in this case, the virus is seen as an apolitical entity with power of reforming the political laws and norms from outside, and B, either as a force appeared from inside the political sphere, biopolitics standpoint that assumes the politicization of biological by the political, but not as an oppressive tool for mass control, how thinks Agamben, but rather as a capable force for punishing the political agents for their excesses. French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy made a calculated and well-balanced critique of Agamben thoughts, where he explained that is the difference between a crisis of techniques and a crisis of politics. In this case, the techniques are not a blind instrument used in the interest of political, but the political becomes as an enforcer of certain imperatives outside its sphere. And I will cite Jean-Luc Nancy from his article responding to a Gambanian perspective named A Viral Exception. Giorgio states that governments take advantage of all sorts of pretexts to continuously establish states of exception. But he fails to note that the exception is indeed becoming the rule in a world where technical interconnections of all kinds, movement, transfer of every time, impregnation or spread of substances, and so on, are reaching a hitherto unknown intensity that is growing at the same rate as the population. Even in rich countries, this increase in population entails a longer life expectancy, hence an increase in the number of elderly people and in generally of people at risk. We must be careful not to hit the wrong target. An entire civilization is in question, there is no doubt about it. There is a sort of viral exception, biological, computer scientific, cultural, which is pandemic. Governments are nothing more than grim executioners, and taking out on the seems more like a diversionary maneuver than a political reflection. And this is these are the conclusions of my study, which are inciting to do a Deleuzian shift on understanding the pandemics and not a Gambanian shift. A Deleuzian standpoint would be more adequate in thinking about COVID-19 pandemic because, first of all, it's anti-reductive. Deleuze would not reduce this crisis just to its political dimension because of his understanding of events as source of multiplicity and plurality. Agamben proposed a view where the governors still have a direct power towards the civilians at the level of politics and norms. The perspective proposed by Deleuze is demonstrated clearly that the interaction between rulers and those who are ruled is a mediated interaction due to an economic context that has the autonomy to dictate the political laws, norms, and measures for its own purpose. And now we see that due to COVID-19 pandemic, this economic context is shut down and is put on pause, and the virus is the new ruler of the world, the new agent that dictates the political actions. A Gambanian perspective is limiting itself to just offer a political diagnosis of this crisis without looking for any kind of future resolution, whereas a Deleuzian perspective incites to assume an active stance on overcoming the aftermath of this crisis. For example, supporting any kind of alterity that is suffering from this crisis through the lens of the concept of becoming. Deleuze used the concept of becoming Earth to support any kind of person and any kind of agent that has a problem and is affected by this crisis. Thank you for your attention. This is my my bibliography.
Thank you for the presentation and your participation. And now I'm inviting to Zeynep Sağır and Gizem Mutaflı with their presentation about concerns of university students in Turkey in the COVID-19 process.
Hello everyone, I am Zeynep Sağır from Maltepe University. I will talk about anxiety of university students in Turkey in the COVID-19 process. I am Zeynep and my friend Gizem Mutaflı. Coronavirus process and Turkey. Turkey is among the countries where COVID-19 arrived late. However, many countries caught the coronavirus earlier. COVID-19 first appeared on December 1, 2019 in Wuhan, China. With the detection of the first cases in China, the Ministry of Health and other ministries took various measures in Turkey, and for these reasons, the arrival of the COVID-19 virus to the country was late. The first case in Turkey was seen on March 11, 2020. Currently, as in many countries, COVID-19 continues in Turkey. COVID-19 process effects on education system in Turkey. During the COVID-19 process, schools were suspended, as were many institutions. Education was suspended at all levels of schools for 3 weeks at universities. Later, universities moved the education system to the online system. In this process, universities with online system infrastructure made a rapid transition to online education. As a result of the analysis announced by the Council of Higher Education, multiple universities which offers the most online courses and live classes ranked first among foundation universities, but not every university was ready for the online infrastructure system. In this process, studies such as internet support and tablet support were carried out. Exams have been reverted to homework or open-ended question format. What is anxiety? Anxiety, also known as anxiety disorder, is a psychological disorder. It is normal to experience occasional anxiety in our daily lives, because we can worry about the events we face in time, or we can have material spiritual concerns about the future. Although it is normal to have anxiety in daily life, if there is an excess in those, then we can talk about a medical illness. People with anxiety disorders have an intense, persistent state of anxiety and fear of everyday situations. It can also manifest itself with panic attacks. This state of extreme worry, anxiety, and panic interferes with the continuation of daily activities. It is difficult to control and manage, and it is not possible to predict time. Symptoms of this condition can begin in childhood and adolescence and continue into adulthood. It tends to decrease after adulthood. Anxiety in the COVID-19 process. It has been determined that there is an increase in the anxiety rate in studies on the psychological and social effects of the new coronavirus in Turkey due to reasons such as virtual chains, experienced during the corona process, news of death, fears of financial livelihood, fears of health problems, and future anxiety in students. We also investigated the effect of university students' anxiety and academic achievement. We conducted a survey on university students in Turkey for the anxiety effect of coronavirus on students. We will talk about the answers given by students from different departments of different universities that we asked 50 students. Now, my friend Gizem Mutaflı will continue. Thank you for listening to me.
Hi everyone, my name is Gizem Mutaflı. I would like to talk about the scale we use it in the research. Turkish version of the coronavirus anxiety scale. The scale was adapted to Turkish by Hayri Koç and Coşkun Arslan. The validity and reliability studies of the Turkish version of the scale were carried out on individual age 17 to 71 years. The relationship of the Turkish version of the coronavirus anxiety scale with the burnout scale used for similarity validity is significant. In addition, the relationship between the coronavirus anxiety scale, which is used at the discriminant validity of the Turkish version of the coronavirus anxiety scale, is significant. The internal consistency coefficient was found to be 0.81. Item total correlation values in the scale range from 0.73 to 0.79. The result of the conformity factor analysis performed showed that the single factor models has a perfect fit. The findings showed that the psychometric properties of the Turkish version of the coronavirus anxiety scale were sufficient. Anxiety survey assessment in the Turkey in COVID-19. We carry out the scale with the Google survey with 50 participants. In this questionnaire, there are items of which university the students study, which department the students study, the grades of the students, the gender of the students' grade point average, and the coronavirus anxiety scale. Let's examine the surveys in the more detail. Firstly, now I would like to share the analysis of the question with you, in which universities are participants study. As a result, students are studying at Koca University 66%, Maltepe University 18%, Sakarya University 6%, Koç University 2%, Sabancı University 2%, Istanbul University 2%, Galatasaray University 2%, and Marmara University 2%. Second question, in which faculties students study? Let's look at the faculties that the participants attend. Faculty of Education 14%, Faculty of Line 40%, Faculty of Business 4%, Faculty of Engineers 14%, Faculty of Medicine 4%, Faculty of Economics and Administrative Sciences 18%, Faculty of Health Sciences 4%, Faculty of Humanity and Social Sciences 2%. Another question, what class are students studying? As a result, 26% of the students are in first grade, 46% of the students are in the second grade, 16% of the students are in the third grade, 12% of the students are in the fourth grade. And 68% of the students are women and 32% are men. Look at the students' grade point average. 6% of the students have a grade points average between 2 and 2.5. 24% of the students have a grade average between 2.5 and 3. 44% of the students have a grade points average between 3 and 3.5. 26% of the students have a grade points average between 3.5 and 4. Now let's examine the question about anxiety. Question 1, the answer given the participant to the question: I feel dizzy or unconscious when I read or listen to the news about the coronavirus. 44% never, 26% rare, 12% a few days, 10% less than 7 days, 8% almost every day in the last 2 weeks. And second question, I had trouble falling asleep or staying asleep because I was thinking about the coronavirus. Responses of the participant to the question: 56% never, 22% rare, 14% a few days, 4% less than 7 days, 4% almost every day in the last 2 weeks. Another question, I felt paralyzed or frozen when I thought about or was exposed to information about the coronavirus. Responses of participants to the question: 80% never, 12% rare, 2% a few days, and 6% almost every day in the last 2 weeks. Another question, I lost interest in eating when I was thinking about or exposed to information about the coronavirus. Responses of the participant to the question: 66% never, 24% rare, 6% a few days, 2% less than 7 days, 2% almost every day in the last 2 weeks. And last question, I felt nation or had stomach problems when I thought about or was exposed to information about the coronavirus. Responses of the participant to the question: 60% never, 20% rare, 14% a few days, 4% less than 7 days, 2% almost every day in the last week. As a result, it was found that female students had more anxiety level than male. Looking at the total participant in the study, it cannot be said that they have very high anxiety levels. However, an increase was observed in the anxiety levels of individuals whose academic success was between 3 and 3.5. In our sample, they was no significant relationship between academic achievement and anxiety. Suggestion for the new students. The sample was limited only the universities in the Marmara region in Turkey. It can be studied with a larger sample group across Turkey. Male, female students are dominant in the sample. The sample can be chosen so that male students and female students are equal. There is no attempt in the questionnaire about the personality traits of the students. Questions about students' personality traits can be added to the new research. Thank you for listening to me. If you have question, you can send email to this address or social media account. Again, thank you for listening to me. Sesin kapalı Özge.
Sorry for that. Thank you for the presentation. The next presentation is by Melike Tiftik, Beyzanur Menekşe, and Ayşe Sarıgül with the subject of evolution of the assessment and evaluation systems in the distance learning.
Hello, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can see you and we can hear you too.
Okay. Now can you see this screen as well? It should. Yeah. Okay. Hello everyone. I'm Beyzanur Menekşe from International University of Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Here are my colleagues Ayşe Sarıgül and Melike Tiftik. We are all from English Language and Literature teaching program. And thank you for this opportunity for presenting our ideas regarding the evolution of the assessment and evaluation system in the distance learning. So, firstly, I want to introduce our subject regarding the new adaptation to feature. First of all, as you can see in the screen, title is Evolution of the Assessment and Evaluation System in the Distance Learning. We studied on this subject because due to the COVID virus, the education system has been significantly changed in the whole world. And here are our keywords: evolution, assessment, distance learning, and COVID virus. Our research findings are based on IUS students and IUS professors. We surveyed and also we interviewed regarding the changing education system for identify more detail. And we have discussed within the framework of online assignments and exams, interaction, feedback, but also motivation, high expectation, and technical issues. Those high expectation and technical issues can be related with the motivation, so they are like a subtitle of the motivation. So this is the first step, which is online assignments and exams. The modification of formats of the exams, assignments, and interim activities in the higher education process are researched. Specifically, open book exam style, which is students, but also teachers were not familiar with it. And some of educators insisted on using the traditional exam styles. However, who use the open book exam style are not only designed to measure students' recall of information, but also to integrate their knowledge and include higher order thinking skills. So open book exam style are offered for the future new normal period, but also it actually removes the assumptions and also worries about the copy paste and plagiarism issue. And also these questions are formulated according to open book exam styles. On the other hand, what we have: research paper, oral exam, interim activities, and assignments. Research paper are used replace of the midterm exam and final exam, and which is so useful way to measure the students' knowledge without stressful way.
So oral exam is a kind of way for measuring the students' knowledge with orally, and interim activities and assignments are helping to us in the assessment period. Regarding this, according to our research and survey, we asked a question to the students, IUS students. The question was, I would choose that professors can keep using their new styles of assessment and evaluation systems after the pandemic process over, such as oral exams, research papers, different examination styles, and interim activities. So 60% of them said, yes, we agreed on it. So we can say that in connected with it, students were able to observe and also identify their own skills and improved despite the increase in the difficulty levels of their semester tasks during the online education. So their self-assessment and also self-learning is improved regarding the new system of evaluation system. The next step is interaction, which is so essential thing, an element in the education life. It's an element in the classroom that allows the student to stick more closely to the assigned tasks and transform the communication with the teacher into a little more personal communication. However, transforming of the educational system, it puts interaction away. For example, everybody turn off their cameras or their microphones. Even if the professor asks something, people did not answer it. All of us experienced it. So regarding this, for enriching the idea, we asked a question for measuring the comfortability of the students in the classroom or in the, let's say, online education. So the question was, I feel more comfortable expressing myself and discussing ideas while showing my comprehension to the professors or educators in the classroom. In the traditional education, it means that. So 60% of them said, yes, we agreed on it. Considering this, interaction is actually triggers and develops reflective and critical thinking. In connected with it, we also asked to get idea about how to shape the element of interactivity in new normal. So the question was, after the pandemic process over, I will effectively participate in the classes more than online education. 72% of them said, yes, we will. So according to these results, students need interaction in the classrooms rather than online. So the new normal should be more interaction-oriented activities to meet those kind of needs, because many activities are postponed during the online education. The next step is feedback. It's an important part of education as well, and it's an effective and developing method to indicate the deficiencies of the students, and also a student can reflect on the skills they need to develop. Constructive and supportive feedback is very important for students for improving their skills, and therefore we asked IUS students, do you think the feedback during the pandemic process is sufficient and helpful? 72% of them said yes, it was. Besides, many of instructions noted that professors should be and also will be more attentive to feedback in the new normal period, according to one of the research. On the other hand, the next step is motivation, which also related with the feedback and also high expectation and technical issues. So motivation is one of the most important factors for keeping the stability of things in people's lives. And it's also one of the part of education is affected during the COVID virus negatively and also badly, which is so critical point. And we all locked down during that period, and we try to measure IUS students' perceptions regarding to their success and also their motivations. The question was, I believe that I will increase my success and motivation when I return to my social learning environment. So 72% of them said, yes, we will. Additionally, in another question, which is formed as open-ended, for understand the factors that why they decrease their motivation. Of course, we know, but we just try to identify more carefully. And some of them dependent that their own motivation on. The first thing, the process of adaptation. The second thing, not to manage time properly, difficulties of the online education, and intense assignments. But some of them complain about the environmental factors, technical issues, changing the formats of examination, and these are the factors for decreasing their motivations in the performances. However, we cannot say that only students affected, also teachers are affected. In regard to this, we noted that about the intrinsic motivation, which is so a suggestion for the future. According to an article in the context of education, a student who has self-autonomy in their learning process and who tend to follow tasks, it means that competence, increase their intrinsic motivation. However, an autonomous learning environment, such as distance learning, like in this situation, is only kept high by actors, by student or by teacher, doesn't matter, who feel competent. Therefore, perceived competence is seen as an important determinant of intrinsic motivation. On the other hand, as I told you, motivation is connected with the high expectation. So somehow students and educators encounter that disappointment of the high expectations, sometimes decrease the motivation of the people, and it affected the assessment period and evolution period. So in this regard, briefly to illustrate, I'll give you a chain. Please follow me carefully, okay? So, for example, the professor cannot assess and evaluate like in the classroom, right? And the student cannot be interactive, as I explained before, and there is no eye contact, no physical appearance, and such technical issues may come up during the class, and the student can be relaxed more than usual and do not follow the class properly. Such environmental factors come up and distract the class or examination time, and as a result of those factors, what happened? The educators cannot find what they expect, and they assess in a more stressful way, such as more quizzes, hard exams, intense assignments. Those kind of things bring the decreasing motivation and also stress. And that's why students do not expect high grades because of the lack of motivation, and they do not show their real knowledge during their assessing period, unfortunately. According to UNICEF education staff findings, in such a time, they suggested that in such a time, high expectation should have been decreased and the risks of the evolution should let down, and formative assessment can be followed in the near future. In this context, professors should not expect the same and also high performances from each student because there is no equality right now between the students. The next thing is, we asked those IUS professors what about their evolution of assessments. They answered that, the most of them answered that they consider difficulties may face up during this period, and some of them increased the percentage of the presentations for improving the grades. Some of them found a way for eliminating the stress of exams, such as research paper or written papers. And one of them sent the feedback in a more motivational pattern. One of them gives enough time for assignments and interim activities expanded through the semester. So the next step is technical issues are the factors that all of us experience. Before the COVID virus, technology was in our lives. However, after that, we all tied up with it. So as well as the usefulness, some problems and challenges are taking place. These are the facts that influence and decrease the motivations of the students and the educators. One of the analyses of the research paper They asked a question to the students about technical issues, and many of the university students complained about their systems were not capable to reach a proper education because of the technical capacity. For example, connection problems, not being able to connect to the platform, postponing messages can be some not clear. So for this, some new adaptation and solutions were suggested, such as recording the lectures. Professors could have been more flexible for the attendances and also duration of the exams. In this regard, we asked a question for understand about the attendance issue. So the question was, should be attendance a kind of evaluation and assessment method or not? 77% of the IUS students said it should not be. So for the picture, we suggested that the strict attendance rules should not have been used by the educators as an assessment system and evaluation. So obviously that COVID-19 is continuing to take place, and even if the education will evolve as means of the hybrid system of if we return our schools, it doesn't matter. Educators are going to stick to online education. Thereupon, lastly, we suggested that flexible and comfortable systematic online education should be constructed by educator as means of the assignments and or assessment or evaluation period. So this is the end of our presentation. Here are our references. Thank you so much for your listening.
If you have a question, we would like to answer.
We cannot hear you.
Sorry for that. Thank you for this group for their presentations. And the question and answer part is at the end of the session.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
See you. And now I'm inviting the last presenter on this session, Anastasia Dorofeeva, with her presentation about impact of the COVID-19 on the academic environment of Russian universities.
Okay, hello everyone. I hope that my presentation is available for you. My name is Anastasia, and it's an honor for me to take part in the course. I'm from the Russian Federation, and I'm a second-year student at the Financial University under the government of the Russian Federation. The topic of my presentation is the impact of the COVID-19 on the academic environment of Russian universities. I'm going to develop 4 main points. We will start with a general description of the situation in the global higher education sector. Then we will characterize the overall state of the Russian higher education sector in the context of the pandemic. Finally, we are going to identify the main problems of the organization of the educational process in the new conditions and consider the measures of the Russian government to improve its efficiency. To begin with, UNESCO estimates that more than 1.5 billion students haven't attended their educational institutions permanently or occasionally since the beginning of 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has sparked an unprecedented online movement in the history of education and forced the global academic community to embrace new ways of teaching and learning, including distance and online education. This actually proved to be a challenging task for both students and teachers, and caused serious emotional, physical, and economic difficulties. It should be mentioned that the pandemic has had an impact on all spheres of modern life, of modern students' life. Thus, fundamental changes in the academic sphere were associated with the need to quickly switch to online lectures, the transformation of communication channels with teachers, and the need to adapt to new methods of knowledge evaluation. The changes also affected the public and personal life of students. I mean the restrictions on face-to-face communication with friends and colleagues, job losses, and concerns about financial situation, future education, and career. Nevertheless, it's assumed that the pandemic has also led to some positive changes in the habits of both students and faculty representatives. What is meant is taking care of your own health, devoting more time to sports, creative activities, and academic work. Through this paper, we aim to consider and bring the light to the impact of the COVID-19 on the academic environment of Russian universities. The actuality of the research lies in the fact that the majority of experts believe that the introduction of online education will continue after the pandemic and remain relevant. In this regard, all participants of the educational process need to successfully adapt to the new conditions and learn how to organize academic activities both in a completely remote and mixed format of education without losing effectiveness. The Russian experience of restructuring the education system in the context of the pandemic is generally assessed as successful. The Ministry of Science and Higher Education of the Russian Federation, from the first day of the introduction of epidemiological restrictions, took control of the situation and organized the transition to a distance learning format. I would like to mention that a special line through which universities could receive comprehensive support was created. Moreover, the Situation Center of the Ministry of Education and Science, the main purpose of which was to monitor the development of the online educational environment in Russian universities, was established. The transition was also accompanied by changes in the federal law on education in the Russian Federation in terms of using the distance learning technologies. Let me now move on to the next part of my presentation. According to the Ministry of Science and Higher Education of the Russian Federation, about 60% of Russian higher education institutions have successfully switched to a distance learning format amid the pandemic. Another 27% of universities experienced difficulties in their work. 10 of them were unfortunately completely unprepared for the transition to a new format of educational process. For the most part, this was due to the lack of infrastructure necessary for the digitalization of education. Actually, the problem of inequality of technical capabilities of universities has become the main obstacle to the successful implementation of educational activities in the country. At the time of the outbreak of the pandemic, the level of internet penetration in the Russian Federation was 76%. Before the forced transition to a distance learning format, this issue wasn't so acute. However, at a critical moment, the quality of the educational process was directly dependent on the technical equipment of all representatives of the education system. Nevertheless, despite the fact that a number of universities didn't immediately manage to effectively establish the educational process in the electronic environment, it should be mentioned that there were no cases of complete termination of universities' work in Russia.
An important problem that we are going to consider is the insufficient level of digital literacy of teachers, some of whom were not ready for the accelerated introduction of computer technologies into their work process. The issue was particularly relevant for universities with a low level of technical equipment located in rural areas. However, similar problems were observed also in the leading universities of the Russian Federation. Nevertheless, it should be mentioned that effective measures aimed at improving the level of digital literacy of the teaching staff were immediately taken in the number of higher educational institutions. Among them, for example, were the emergence of digital consultants in the financial university under the government of the Russian Federation, digital volunteers in the National Research University High School of Economics, and the creation of new educational programs related to digital mentoring in State St. Petersburg University. By the way, according to the research conducted by the High School of Economics, about half of Russian students noted that the effectiveness of their educational process decreased after switching to the distance learning. The problem is especially relevant for educational programs with a high proportion of practical tasks, for example, medical education. Interestingly, by the end of the academic year, when about 3 months since the transition to distance learning have passed, the difficulties were mostly related not to the lack of technical devices, but to the psychological state of the students. The following graph depicts the main psychological difficulties of students caused by the transition to distance learning. As we can see, among them are a lack of communication, reduced motivation, difficulties with concentration, and discomfort from participating in online classes. Moreover, as the graph shows, these problems were compounded gradually during the first months of working in online format. However, I should note that along with the difficulties, new opportunities appear. A third of surveyed students like the online format of education more than the traditional one. In addition, there is an increase in the attendance of classes in some disciplines. What is more than half of students noted that they generally had more free time after switching to distance learning. Other benefits of online education include a variety of courses, convenience and flexibility, technical skills development, and others. That brings me to my final part. We can conclude that despite the inevitable difficulties, the activities of most Russian universities during the pandemic continued in normal mode, thanks to the support of government authorities and coordinated work of all participants of the educational process. In our opinion, the issue of overcoming psychological problems that arise in students during online learning process requires a more detailed consideration. That brings me to the end of my presentation. References are presented on the following slide, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for the presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, now we will have a question and answer part. But as I can see, there is no question. So I am finishing the first session. We will take a break before the second session of the Congress. It will be 25 minutes of break. The second session will start at 13:15. Thank you for joining us. See you in the session 2.